images. Are you hearing me now? Okay, well, let's begin that again. Thanks for joining us here at Dome at Home, the Manitoba Museum's award-winning astronomy and space podcast / live broadcast. I'm your host, Scott Young. I am the planetarium astronomer here, and hopefully you can now hear. Okay, good. Hey, there we go. Okay. All right. So we have a busy show today. We've got lots of stuff. Lots of images came in over the last month. Thank you all for those of you that sent in images. And we'll get to a bunch of them tonight. And I've saved a few of them that will come in for next month, I think. But we love to see what you've been doing in astronomy. Now, I don't know about you, but the only nights that were clear were nights where I had other obligations. I'm coaching volleyball for my daughter this year. That takes a couple of nights a week. And it turned out that I was coaching volleyball exactly during the Mars eclipse back in January the 13th. So I walked into practice. Mars was on one side of the moon. I came out of practice. Mars was on the other side of the moon. And I missed the whole thing in between. But luckily, we got some pictures sent in from that. Okay, I want to start off by talking about the planetary alignment. You've probably heard all about the parade of planets, they're calling it now, because planetary alignment isn't alliteration enough for the marketing folks. So here's the thing. The planets are always aligned. They're always in a line across the sky. That's the geometry of our solar system. Literally every day since the Earth was formed, the planets have all been in a line across our sky. The key is how big that grouping is and whether you can see them all at once. So there was a thing at the beginning of the year saying, oh, January 25th, you'll be able to see 7 planets in alignment. There was nothing special about that particular day, but it has been a good time. All of January and all of February is going to be great to see all of the planets in the evening sky. We'll even be able to catch Mercury, that elusive one that's always hanging out near the sun, right towards the end of February. But some of those planets are nice and big and bright. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, even Saturn's pretty easy to spot. But Uranus and Neptune are invisible to the unaided eye. So you can chop those off the alignment right away. I mean, we might as well say the 1 million asteroids that we've discovered are also all in alignment. You just won't see them without a telescope. There's been a lot of hype around this. And as soon as the January 25th date passed, they immediately started pushing the next planetary parade, which is February 28th. Again, nothing special about that particular day. So the message to take away from here is, first, don't believe most of the things you see on social media, or at least dig into them a little bit more. But second, it is a good time to see the planets. Not on a specific date, not on a specific time. It's not going to be spectacular one day and then totally boring the next day. It's awesome the whole time. So get out there and have fewer social obligations than I do, and be able to make use of those clear skies and check things out there. Let me see what we got here. Oh, we got folks from Ben and the family is there, and Bob. Oh, Bob, you're out in Alberta. Nice. Okay, great. And RASC Montreal. Hey, Karim, nice to see you. We've been chatting offline or online about some upcoming projects, so that's pretty cool. Nice to see you. All right. So we're going to talk about the planets that you can see. We're also going to talk about, some of you might have caught this over the last day or so, there's a new asteroid that's been discovered that they're talking about, it's going to have a close approach to the Earth and things like that. We'll talk about that. I'm not worried at this point. This happens all the time. These asteroids are discovered, and then after a week or a month or so, they have enough observations that the error bars shrink down, and it turns out that it's not a threat at all. That's probably what's going to happen with this one too. But we'll talk about that as well. But first, I want to get to some of your images. So let us start off by popping over to some of the images here. Hey, Andy and Ruby, I hope you're out there. I didn't see the name go by in the chat, but thanks for sending in some of your pictures. This is a great shot of Venus, which is the brightest object right in the center there, and Saturn, the second brightest object a little bit farther to the left. There's a star right next to Venus, and there's a star right next to Saturn as well. So those are some of the background stars of, I think it's Aquarius in the background there. But this was part of the planetary alignment, the parade of planets. Over the course of a week or so, Venus sort of hung out in that spot, and Saturn slowly moved down towards the bottom left and past Venus as it all goes around the sun. This is a great shot. Thanks a lot, Andy, for sending that in. And I think I got a couple more of yours here. Oh yes, the Mars eclipse, or occultation, as we say. This is a nice shot of the nearly full moon rising. You can see Mars to the bottom left there, and it actually does have quite a nice orangey red color. And then here's a close-up. You can see the full moon, and I hope you can see Mars there, just a little dot at about the 7:30 or 8 o'clock position from the moon. Yeah, hopefully you can see that. Great shots, Andy. Thanks for sending those in. This was another cool picture that we got. Tara sent this in, had a little bit of a Mexican vacation over the winter, a great time to go, and visited Chichen Itza, the Mayan city. And one of the cool spots there is called the Caracol. It is a observatory, and it was designed, you can see there's a big window there. If you stand in the middle and you look out the various windows, they point towards the important calendar dates of the Mayan calendar, which was all based on the planet Venus. So the Venus's farthest northern rising and setting and farthest southern rising and setting were parts of the way that they defined the calendar. And so they had these observatories, not unlike Stonehenge or the medicine wheels of the Great Plains here in North America, to help mark the calendar. And I've always wanted to go here. It's definitely one of my bucket lists. So thanks very much, Tara. If you Google the Caracol or search it under whatever your search engine of choice is, there's all sorts of cool information. Obviously, the Mayans had to know the sky pretty well, and maybe they didn't understand, gravity and the elliptical orbits the way we look at them today, but they obviously knew these periodic cycles enough to be able to use them. Not just the sun, the obvious one, but to use the planet Venus to come up with a calendar. Very, very cool stuff. Fallon sent some pictures in too. These are shots through her telescope with her phone, I think. And so this is the double cluster between Cassiopeia and Perseus. Two beautiful star clusters there. Nice sprinkling of stardust. This is a great view in any telescope or even in binoculars. And then the Orion Nebula. That's really cool. I mean, you can see the shape of it. There's this little dark mouth on the right-hand side, and I'm not sure if it comes through the broadcast, but you can see little tendrils of the gas stretching around the central stars where the stars are forming. Beautiful shot. And yeah, that's one of my favorite objects in the whole sky. So it's always nice to see a shot of the Orion Nebula. A colleague of mine, Terry Trupp, sent this in right around that same time. We had those 2 or 3 clear nights in January, right around the Martian eclipse, and Venus and Saturn together. And there was a lot of humidity and a lot of ice crystals, and we wound up with sun dogs during the day, but also moon dogs or moon halos during the night. And this was a nice one because you got those 2 moon halos going all the way around. And this was a really kind of an eerie sight when you see it. The camera does a good job of recording what you can see, what's there, but when you see it live, the moonlight is just such a ethereal kind of view. It's a beautiful sight. So thanks a lot, Terry, for sending that in. Okay, we did this a little while ago, where I sort of picked a constellation and we did a little feature on it. I'm going to bring that back because we've got a lot of folks that are, going out and finding things in the sky. We've got folks with binoculars or telescopes or cameras or whatever, and they're looking for things to look for. And so by going through some of these constellations, we can highlight some of the interesting stars, the interesting objects, all that kind of stuff that's up there. So connect the dots this month. We're going to start with the dots and see if you can connect them, figure out what constellation we are. Here's the star field that we're looking at. And you can feel free to drop something into the chat if you think you can identify the constellation that we're looking at. I will give you another second or so, and then we'll add the artwork just to give you a little bit of a hint. That's what it's supposed to look like. I never see that, but that's what they tell me it's supposed to look like. We're actually going to be featuring the constellation of Taurus the Bull. And Taurus the Bull, of course, is one of the 12 constellations of the zodiac. We're not going to do horoscopes, but those constellations got picked for a very important reason. They got picked because that's the path in the sky that the planets parade through. There are no planets that go through the Big Dipper, for example, and so the Big Dipper is not a zodiac constellation, but Taurus is. And, actually, I saw somebody said Orion. Orion is actually just down to the bottom left of Taurus. You can just see the belt of Orion just above the edge of the frame. So you're right in the right area. Right now, Taurus is host to one of the planets. The planet Jupiter is right there, sort of distorting the constellation. I mean, Jupiter is so much brighter than the stars that it really makes everything look completely different. I mean, you see Jupiter before you see anything else. But Jupiter will not be there all the time. It'll slowly move in the sky, and eventually, by next year, it'll move on to the next constellation. So we've talked about Jupiter before. It was at its best sort of last month, and it's still really, really bright up in the evening sky, nice and high. And it's right above some of these other constellations, these other star groups, the bright star Aldebaran. Aldebaran is a red giant star. And what that means is it's red, as opposed to the sun, which is sort of yellowish white. And it's giant. This is the scale of the Aldebaran compared to the sun. And gives you a sense of, how puny our sun is compared to some of these other things. Aldebaran's one of the closest red giant stars to us. And so it's a pretty interesting star. It also does have that sort of characteristic red-orange color that you'll see. Aldebaran looks like it's part of a group of stars that shapes the V shape of Taurus the Bull's face. That is a star cluster called the Hyades. Now, it turns out the Hyades is closer to us and Aldebaran's off in the distance. So they just happen to be lined up from our point of view, but they're not actually connected. Aldebaran's quite a bit farther away. But the Hyades is a star cluster that's only about 150 light years away. And so instead of seeing a little fuzzy spot in the sky, or like the double cluster that Fallon took through her telescope, we actually see the stars kind of spread out because it's actually close enough that we can see, over 100 stars in a pair of binoculars. Lots of bright ones, lots of little double stars or little pairs or things like that, and then brilliant Aldebaran off on the side. So that's a great thing to look at in binoculars, and lots of beautiful stars in that region of the sky. Star clusters form from nebula, like the Orion Nebula. Again, one of Fallon's pictures, the cloud of gas, hydrogen condenses down and forms a bunch of stars, and those stars form in a cluster like this. And over millions of years, they'll eventually all drift away from each other, or most of them won't stay together. Like family. The kids grow up and they move away and they go off into their own place in the universe. The Hyades hasn't done that yet. It's still a relatively young star cluster, so it's all the stars are clustered together. Right nearby is another star cluster, probably a more famous one, the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters, the Hole in the Sky constellation. It has many names. M45, Messier 45 is another name that it's sometimes known by. The Pleiades is basically the same kind of star cluster as the Hyades. It's a little farther away, though. It's about 400 light years away, so we're seeing it, at less magnification, essentially, because it's farther away from us. And in photographs, so there's a little bit of this blue material here. Now, when I started doing astronomy, they said, well, that's some of the leftover gas from the nebula that formed all those stars. So these stars are really young and they just formed out of that gas. It turns out that that's not actually true. It turns out that the Pleiades, like everything else in the galaxy, they're all orbiting the center of the galaxy, taking hundreds of million years to go around. And the Pleiades star cluster just happens to be cruising through an area right now where there was dust. It basically caught up to a dust bunny in the galaxy and is going through it. And the light from the stars is lighting up that dust, reflecting off of it, and getting this blue material. So that's one of the things that's changed since I started doing astronomy a number of years ago. We'll just leave it at that. Yes, they had already discovered Pluto, and yes, we still had telescopes when I started this. I'm not that old, but it is kind of amazing in just a few decades how our understanding of the universe has changed. And Taurus is a great example of that, with all of the star clusters there. Now, star clusters are the beginning of stars' lives. Aldebaran is a red giant star. It is near the end of its life. And when a star like Aldebaran explodes in a supernova, you wind up with the death of a star. And there's one of those in Taurus too. So we can kind of see the whole life cycle of stars just by looking at this one constellation. Over near the southern horn of Taurus, there's an object labeled M1. M stands for Messier, the famous comet hunter of the 18th century, who was looking for comets and instead kept finding these other fuzzy things in the sky. So he wrote them down so he wouldn't think that they were comets, because you got paid for discovering comets back in the day. Well, he discovered a few comets, but he's most famous for this list of other stuff, because it turns out all that other stuff is some of the coolest stuff to look at in telescopes. So the Messier list is sort of a rite of passage for many amateur astronomers to sort of complete that list of 110 objects. Object number 1, up there in Taurus right now, the Crab Nebula. It's the wreckage of a blown up star. And at the very heart of that wreckage is the dead heart of the star. It's a star about the size of the planet Earth, and it spins 15 times a second. And it's extremely dense, and it sends out beams of radiation, much like a lighthouse beacon spinning around. And that's all that's left of some star that went supernova back in the year 1054. We know that because people saw it. There was a star that exploded in that part of the sky that was recorded by Chinese and Japanese astronomers in the year 1054. And so this is what's left when you look at it with a telescope now. Oops, thought I had one more. So Taurus has a bunch of cool stuff in it. It's nice and high in the sky right now, really well placed to look for. You can try and get a glimpse of it. And good luck trying to find the shape of a bull. For me, it's the V shape of the face. The two horns are the two stars that sort of stick off to the side. And then there's the Pleiades and some other stuff that I just don't pay attention to. But that's plenty. So there's our feature of Taurus the Bull. And we'll come back to that in just some other stuff in just a moment. I just want to check chat here. I don't have... One of my monitors died, and so I'm running everything on one monitor right now, and so it's like 19 windows all open. Tiffany asks, how did they determine it was a dust bunny and not one unit? That is a great question. I believe it has to do with the relative velocities of the stars. You can measure by measuring the rainbow of colors and how they line up of each star. You can figure out how it's moving towards or away from you. And the relative motion of the stars versus the relative motion of the dust don't match up. So it's not like the whole thing was traveling together. But yeah, it's something that was just taken as given because it made so much sense. You know, stars are made out of nebula. Here's a star cluster with some nebula left over. That's what you would expect, right? And it's just recently that someone realized, I wonder if nobody checked on it because we just figured it made sense so much. I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay, let us move on to a couple of the highlights for what's going on in February. We're always looking ahead a month here, so let's pop over to our favorite planetarium program, Stellarium. And Stellarium tells us basically everything that's going on in the sky. I run it on the desktop because it's got a lot of neat features. Everything from being able to print out charts to being able to control your telescope. But there's also an online version that you can use that works pretty well. This is the sky on Saturday nights, just after sunset, maybe 6:30 or so, looking off towards the southwest. Venus is at its extreme brightest this month, and the thin crescent moon is going to be right beside it. And then halfway down to the horizon, we still have Saturn. Now, Saturn is probably not worth looking at it with a telescope at this point because it's down so low in the atmosphere, it's just probably a bit of a mess. But it is definitely a cool part of the alignment. Actually, if we rewind to tomorrow night, I'm not sure if you'll catch this, but here's the moon down below Saturn. But the moon will be, let's just see how long it is into its phase here. Yeah, I think it's, there's so much information here. Maybe 7.7% illuminated. That's probably something you could see. Paul Gray, you're out there. What's the limit on the earliest after new moon that you can see a crescent? Like 24 hours or so? Have you seen a 24-hour moon before? Super thin crescent and very, very difficult to spot. Yeah, anyway, you might be able to see that tomorrow night if we get clear skies. If not, the night after, the moon is up near Venus, nice and high, nice and far enough away from the sun that we get a reasonable crescent to see. Okay, we'll get rid of that data there. And then we'll just move along the sky. We'll move along through the zodiac. Here's Pisces, the fish. We'll move through there. Here's Aries, the ram. And then there's Taurus with Jupiter right there in it. And if we keep on going on this line, it looks like it curves because, it's going from one horizon to the other. But the next constellation over here is Gemini, and there's Mars. And if you want to know, Uranus is over here somewhere, still in Taurus, and Neptune is actually down below the moon in Venus. In fact, it's close enough that if we looked in binoculars, here's the moon on Saturday night. There's Venus with a star right next to it. And right there's Neptune. If you've got binoculars, you might be able to spot it. Maybe. The moon's brightness will make it a little tough. But it's right in that part of the sky. And so I guess that's part of the parade of planets. You won't be able to see it very easily, but there it is nonetheless. And by the way, Stellarium is set up for, most common telescopes and binoculars, so you can just select that from a menu, and this is what it looks like through my 7x50 binoculars. So I know, how much of a field of view I'll be able to see. Can I see two things in the field of view at once? Really, really useful for planning out your observations. Okay, so there's all those planets. I mentioned that towards the end of the month, we'll even get to see Mercury. Well, I'm just going to click through day by day here. As we go through February, the sun is setting later and later, which means at 6:30, the sky is still pretty bright. Here we are coming up towards the end of the month. Here we are on the 26th, and it's at 6:30. The sky's pretty bright. Most of the stars aren't even visible. Venus, of course, is visible. And way down here near the horizon, there's Mercury. So right around the 25th or 26th, it'll pop up very, very low to the horizon. You probably will catch it, 15, 20 minutes after sunset or so, maybe half an hour. And by the time an hour after sunset rolls by, it's already will have set along with the sun. Now, right next to Mercury, we can't see it right now, but I think if I zoom in, it'll start to show me. Here, I'm going to turn off the daytime sky. There's a tree in the way. That's the story of my life. I'm just going to get rid of the horizon as well. We'll cut down this tree for a minute. There's Saturn. Saturn is just below Mercury. So while technically, I guess it's kind of aligned, it's going to be so low and so dim, I will be very surprised if anybody can spot Saturn this late into February. But you never know. Binoculars, good vision, nice clear horizon, nice clear weather might be enough to spot that. But make sure you don't have a tree in the way like we have here. So towards the end of the month, that's, I guess, why they're saying, oh, the 28th is the time, because right about then, I'm going to just switch. I'm going to move us to a different part of the world here so that we don't have to deal with this. There we go. Oh, that's not the right one. Here, we'll use the theoretical 0-degree horizon. Here it is on the 28th. Now, it's so close to the sun, I will be very surprised if people can see all of this. But this is actually the moon. If we zoom in, a very, very thin crescent moon. Very, very close to the sun, probably not easily visible, only 1% illuminated. I doubt people will see it, but you never know. Below that is Saturn, and above that is Mercury. So you got these three actually in a line in the sky. And then up straight from that, you have Venus. So that'd be pretty cool to see if we could get a good view of it. I think it'll be really hard for us because as the sky starts to darken, those things start to go down closer to the horizon. So, I mean, are we going to see Saturn when it's just that high above the horizon? I don't think so. But worth watching every single night. From one night to the next, the moon will move along that line, that parade, and you'll see the orbital motion of the moon. The planets will slowly move relative to each other, and if you watch them and you're a careful observer, you'll see that they will move relative to the stars and relative to each other. That's the kind of observation that the Mayans did to figure out the motions of the planets. They didn't have telescopes, they didn't have spacecraft, they didn't have computers. All they had was people who watched the sky and were dedicated to watching the sky, and they were able to figure out these cycles of when Venus would become visible and base their whole calendar on it. So it's kind of cool that we can still do those things today, even though we've got, apps and telescopes and James Webb Space Telescope and stuff like that. So connect with the sky. It's something we've done. It's one of the things that that makes us human. There are almost no other species that really observe the sky the same way that we do. And yes, I know about birds, and yes, I know about monarchs. I think that's a different thing from what I'm talking about, but still super interesting. Wow, what's a tangent of a tangent? Okay, let me just check the chat here and make sure that didn't miss too many things. Okay, oh yeah, so Paul was checking in on the moon. Yeah, I think that this February 2nd should be okay. February 1st, I think, is going to be harder to see. Lou Reeves, any possibility of a feature on smart telescopes? So a smart telescope is one of these little boxes that you plunk down and press the button, and it's got a telescope, and it automatically has GPS, and it finds the thing for you, and it takes pictures, and it puts those pictures on your cell phone. You don't look through it at all. There's no eyepiece or anything. It's strictly for imaging. They are super cool. And actually, the Winnipeg Center of the local astronomy club is featuring smart telescopes on their February meeting, which is February the 21st. Normally it's the second Friday of the month, but that would be Valentine's Day. So it's going to be February the 21st. That gets streamed on the RESC Winnipeg Center's Facebook and YouTube channel. So if you're not a member, you can come to the meeting or you can watch it online. And we're going to have a whole bunch of people that have these smart telescopes talking about their smart telescopes, what they like about them, what they don't like about them, showing some pictures and stuff like that. Also, if you're a member of the Astronomy Club, we bought a smart telescope that is in our lending library now. And so you can take one out for a month and use it yourself. So I'm not sure that we'll talk too much about smart telescopes here, although I think I'm going to start getting more pictures from smart telescopes because I know a number of people have them now, and I'm going to encourage them to do all of that. Let's see. Tiffany, I love the moon in the daytime. It looks like a watermark. Yeah, you know, daytime observing of the moon, it looks totally different up against the blue sky. And just as it's getting into twilight, the moon is wonderful to see in the daytime. Less glare, less contrast, and so it doesn't hurt your eyes as much. It really is kind of a nice thing. And a lot of people aren't aware that, you know, the moon is in the sky in the daytime about half the time. We just usually don't even notice it. So yeah, you can look for those before the sun goes down. You can start to find the moon and figure out where everything else will be for those planets. Oh, hey, Matthew, nice to see you. What if the asteroid headed our way? Will that pass in February? Great question. We're going to talk about the asteroid in our next segment, which is basically all about the things that happen in the sky, lots of space probe and space news and stuff like that. And we call that segment
Cool Space Stuff.
All right, look at that, first image. On Christmas Day, an asteroid was discovered that came pretty close to the Earth. You can see the Earth there and the orbit of the moon, which is about 384,000 kilometers away or so. And then it went just outside of that. This happens all the time. It's not a big deal. This is a smallish asteroid. It's about 20 meters across. So, I mean, we're not talking like the ones that killed the dinosaurs or anything like that. But it went zipping by, and we don't have enough observations of it to really calculate the orbit too far forward in time. As things go around the sun, you know, there's perturbations because maybe it passes close to a planet and the orbit changes a little bit. So you really have to get a whole bunch of positions on this asteroid to really understand the orbit to be able to forecast it. Right now, the forecast is that in 2032, it comes closer to Earth than the moon, about 160,000 kilometers away, still pretty good, but the error bars are more than 160,000 kilometers. So technically, there's a chance that it could hit the Earth in 2032. Now, this happens a lot. We discover an asteroid. The error bars are always big because when you don't have enough information, you've got the plus minus range, and that covers a big area of sky, and so the Earth could be in that. And usually what happens is we get more observations, and the error ellipse, as they call it, basically the plus and minus in the two directions, shrinks down and shrinks down and shrinks down, and then it's small, and the Earth is outside of it. So after, you know, a month or two, we know that the object is not going to hit us. This happened with an asteroid a number of years ago called Apophis. It was forecast to hit the Earth in 2029, and then once the observations had been done that ruled that out, well, that wasn't a news story. So people still think that it's going to hit the Earth in 2029. It's not. It can't. And then they were worried that, oh, it might not hit the Earth, but it'll go through a certain point in space that will change its orbit, so it'll hit us next time around. No, that's been ruled out too. And again, those kind of retractions or corrections never make it onto big social media sites. I expect the same thing will happen right now. So technically, yes, right now I think it's a 1.2% chance that this thing will hit the Earth in 2032. Even if it does, it's only about twice as big as the one that hit Russia a few years ago, the Chelyabinsk one. And that basically exploded in the air, and it blew out a bunch of windows and scared a bunch of people. And a few people were, well, a bunch of people had, like, you know, flying glass or things like that. It was kind of like a minor earthquake in its effect. So this is only about twice as big as that. So we're not worried about, oh, the world ending or things like that, even if it did hit us. I am sure that by the time we do this show next month, I'll be able to say, no, it's not going to hit us, because that's what happens. Earth is really small. We are a hard target. And yes, if you wait 65 million years, sure, something's going to hit us. But the odds of an asteroid hitting in our lifetime is much less than almost any other thing you could worry about. So The problem is when we discover something and it might, people get all worried about it. But there's a bunch of these things flying by that we don't even discover that miss us all the time. Space is full of junk. So I'm not worried about it. We are keeping a close eye on it. In fact, I've even got some telescope time on a telescope in Chile to help take images of this thing and to provide precise positions, because the more people that provide those positions, the faster we can shrink the error bars down. So, I mean, it's definitely a thing to watch, but I'm not worried about it. And this is its orbit. It's so new, it only has a number. It's 2024 YR4, really poetic name. And it loops way out almost to Jupiter's orbit and then loops back in. So it's this kind of big elliptical thing. And yeah, so we'll watch. I will let you know if there's anything to worry about. But like I say, this happens a lot, and it always turns out to be something that is not a risk. Speaking of risks, since our last show, Starship launched. The big rocket with the big spaceship on top, and they kind of took a giant step backwards, let's face it. They had 6 missions before that where things were kind of rough, and then they got better, and they got better, and they got better, and they got better. And then they decided, well, let's change a whole bunch of things all at once on the spacecraft, and then just assume that it's going to work. Well, it didn't. It blew up. So, I mean, I hate to be the guy that says I told you so, but NASA's approach of, doing things slowly and then adding things incrementally and so on, yeah, it takes a long time, but you don't wind up blowing stuff up nearly as often. Now, we'll see what happens. Because of this explosion, SpaceX has to do a whole investigation and things like that, so that's going to slow them down, and who knows. This basically means that we will not be landing on the moon anytime soon, because Starship has to work and go into orbit and survive re-entry. It has to be able to dock with another Starship. It has to be able to transfer propellants. Then they have to build the human landing version of it. That has to be tested. That has to be fueled up in space. It has to fly all the way to the moon, and then we can land on the moon. Well, that's a little ways off. It's disappointing, but I think it's kind of inevitable given the situation at SpaceX in terms of the way they do things. But maybe the next one they will fix all these problems and they'll learn it all really quickly. Who knows? We'll see. This is a cool story. We've been watching Jupiter, and a new storm has been found on Jupiter. Now, if you look at Jupiter, all of these little round oval things, and of course the great red spot, which is well known as a giant storm, those are storms in the clouds of Jupiter. A brand new one was discovered that had never been seen before, and it was discovered by my friend Mike Caracas, who's right here in Winnipeg. He was actually on vacation in Curacao when he took the discovery picture, but still, he's a local guy. And it's, do we have there it is. Okay. That little white storm has never been seen before, and it was discovered by an amateur astronomer with a pretty good telescope, and he spends a lot of time learning to use it and so on. But it's not out of, it's a telescope similar to the one the Astronomy Club has. So it's something that, someone could get access to fairly easily. It's amazing that amateurs are doing this kind of discovery. It's not Hubble Space Telescope. It's not the Juno spacecraft that's actually in orbit around Jupiter. It's guys in their backyard doing high resolution imaging like this. Super cool. We're going to have Mike on the show next month once he's back from Curacao, and we'll chat a little bit, because his journey to becoming a world-class imager like this is really, really cool and inspiring. So he's one of the guys that got me into taking pictures. This is my best picture with the same telescope that he uses. So you take a look, that's him and that's me. I got a little ways to go, but at least I'm heading in that direction. Okay, a little bit more cool space stuff. There are 2 more spacecraft on the way to the moon. not human spacecraft. They are robots. Blue Ghost is one of them by Firefly Aerospace. It's a little lander that is going to go out to the moon and do some testing for NASA and other things. It took some great pictures of the Earth on the way out. So here we have, I believe that this is part of Africa. And then here we have sort of the little animated GIF of the Earth starting to recede in the distance as it's heading out to the moon. It has taken an image of the moon, but it's still quite far away from the moon, and so it's just a little dot. So I didn't bother showing that one, but in the next week or so, Firefly's Blue Ghost will be getting close to the moon and getting ready for landing, so that'll be pretty cool. And it was launched on a Falcon 9 rocket with a second lunar spacecraft. You might remember iSpace. They were the first private moon landing that almost succeeded. They kind of broke their landing legs when they landed, and a bunch of the stuff didn't quite work out. But they're back for another try, and so that is on the way. And it has not just the lander, but it has a little micro rover. This thing is about the size of a shoebox, and they're testing it out as a way to do experiments on the cheap by sending these spacecraft to the moon regularly, and so you can do experiments, or you can collect samples or do all sorts of things in the run-up to the eventual human return to the moon. So those are on the way, and we'll be looking for some cool moon pictures coming up very soon. I thought I had one more picture there. Okay, so lots of cool space stuff. We've got the Parade of Planets ongoing. Don't wait for any given day. Any night that's clear, you'll be able to see Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, and of course, the Earth and the moon, if it happens to be up in the sky, daytime or nighttime. You might be able to catch Mercury at the end of the month. You can check out the giant red star, Aldebaran in Taurus, the Hyades and the Pleiades star clusters. Remember Orion and the Orion Nebula, a great target for binoculars. There's so much to look for in the sky now. It's still getting dark early enough that you don't have to stay up too late. It really is a wonderful time to be doing stargazing. There's no mosquitoes. We don't have to worry about that, right? And there's no, oh, I got a lot of chat here. It's not so cold. I mean, we had a few days where, well, some of our friends that don't live here in Winnipeg, we were into the minus 40s with the wind chill overnight. And it's pretty hard to function with a telescope at that level of temperature. So, and I guess those polar temperatures went all the way down. They had the snow down in New Orleans and Florida and stuff like that. So take advantage of any clear night that you can get. Dress warmly if you need to, but get out there and check out the sky. There's always something cool to watch for. All right. I want to thank all the folks who provided us with the images there, Fallon and Andy and Tara and Terry, and all the other folks that allowed us to use their imaging, and of course Stellarium at stellarium.org for the great planetarium program that is the heart of the show. And our opening theme by Sebastian and Genevieve. We haven't chatted with them recently, but I know they're out there doing well, and hopefully you guys are watching the show. We will be back next month, where we will be talking about the upcoming total lunar eclipse. We have a total lunar eclipse in early March, so we'll talk about it in our show the last Thursday of February, and that will get us all ready for that. We'll also be doing a live broadcast of the eclipse, weather permitting, of course. Apparently, we just looked at our year-end stats, and apparently the most popular episodes are the ones where I'm sitting outside, freezing my butt off, talking to you guys, trying to show you something in the sky, and just getting frostbite. Apparently, that generates more viewers than anything else I can do, even more than George, the cat. So hopefully we'll be out for that. Thanks again. You can always reach us through all of our social media. Where's our thing? Where's our thing? we've lost our sign-off thing. Oh, here we go. You can always reach us through Facebook and YouTube, and email space@manitobamuseum.ca. That's the best way to send us any pictures, because that way they come right to my desk and I can make sure that I get them into the show. And the closer you send them to showtime, the more likely they are to get in. I think a couple months ago I had one that came in sort of middle of the month, and then I forgot about it by the time showtime was around. So I had to put it in the next month. So hit me the week before the next show. And our next show will be on the last Thursday in February, which is February the 27th. See you all then. Have a great night and keep watching the sky.